You're watching Capital Connection from the Illinois State Capitol.
Welcome back. We now turn to our Reporters Roundtable. Joining us this week, it's Brenden Moore with Lee Enterprises and Jeremy Gorner with the Chicago Tribune. Thank you both so much for joining us.
Always a pleasure, Cole.
Thanks, Cole.
We led today's show with this, but the conversation in the Capitol has just been dominated by what's going on in D.C. The cuts that are happening to all the federal agencies and the impacts that is having on Illinois. We've seen just in the past 2 weeks, 2 hearings with no bills to vote on or anything like that, but just there to talk about what these impacts could be, to highlight the problems that they could cause. And it's the Democrats have clearly been trying to make this the centerpiece for this session so far. Brenden, I have a very simple question for you. Is it working?
Well, Cole, yes and no. As one staffer described it to me, it's political theater. They're trying to get these issues out of the forefront, trying to raise alarm bells, maybe make things politically tough for Republicans in the building. Specifically some of the subject matter hearings that were held, one was on Medicaid. Obviously, the state is in danger of losing a lot of funding if the House Republican budget plan, the federal government plan, goes through. And then this past week there was a hearing on cuts to USDA programs, Department of Agriculture. Obviously, there's a lot of federal programs for farmers and for nutritious food and for things of that nature. So they're really just trying to highlight what the impact would be to Illinois. There are no bills attached, as you said. It's just literally hearing testimony from various stakeholders. And is it effective? I mean, yes and no. I mean, it's effective in terms of maybe getting the message out. Obviously, we're talking about it, but it's not in the extent that Illinois Democrats really have no control over, what happens at the federal government. Obviously, President Trump is a Republican. Congress is controlled by Republicans. It's almost it reminds me of kind of what typically we see from Republicans in this building. We go to a lot of press conferences put on by Republicans in the House and Senate who really have little to no control over what happens in this building because Democrats have supermajorities. So all they can really do is kind of bring attention to issues. And so I think we're seeing that from Democrats, where Governor Pritzker has said this as well, that they really can't fill the gap if there are these cuts to Medicaid or to USDA programs or some of these other this funding from the federal government. So what they're doing is trying to raise attention to it. They're giving a lot of floor speeches as well, during their points of personal privilege on the House floor and in the Senate, which I'm sure they will, blast out on social media and in ads, just trying to show they're on top of it. But so messaging, perhaps, but in terms of influencing policy, they really don't have a lot of influence here.
I wonder if there is an element with the Republican side of this, if it is trying to get them in a way to have to stand on defense for this particular topic. It's not very often that Republicans in this building have to play defense, but now in these hearings we've seen them have to not necessarily jump to the defense of the federal cuts we're seeing, but we are seeing them kind of have one similar message. What are we doing here? Talking about the way Brenden called it political theater. We heard Representative Charlie Meyer this week say in this hearing, we don't want to turn the Agriculture Committee in the Capitol, which has historically been very bipartisan and not very politically divided, into this political stage in this way. And he said, we can't do anything about this right now. These are federal funding issues. Why are we holding this in this way? Jeremy, is this, it's a consistent message. It's going to be interesting to see if they can hold their ground on that without having to actually go on the record and say, yes, I think cuts to the USDA are a good thing right now, which we really have not seen from Republicans, most Republicans in this building, besides the very hardcore Trump faithful.
Yeah, well, like you said, it's been a consistent message in that Republicans have really kind of tried to deflect attention away from these subject matter hearings by, questioning the purpose of them. However, I'll give you an example. In the Medicaid hearing, one of the things that came out there were statistics of how some of these possible Medicaid cuts can affect the Republican congressional districts, which affects a lot of Republican state lawmakers' districts as well. They're talking about Mary Miller's congressional district, Darren LaHood's, Mike Boss. I believe with these possible cuts to Medicaid, I believe I remember hearing a statistic that at least one or all, or maybe all of the 3 Republican congressional districts in Illinois have well over 100,000 Medicaid recipients that could be affected by any kind of federal action from this, Capitol Hill Republican budget blueprint that they're passed. So rightfully so, I think if you're a Democrat, that's an Illinois Democrat, here in this building, that could probably serve a purpose that way by saying, hey, we should raise alarm bells about this because Republicans, this could affect you too. This could affect us as an entire state. And so far, you're not really seeing that kind of urgency from Republicans, with that message, because Republicans are really kind of taking more of a wait and see approach because they really don't know what the full they don't really know what the full impact of these possible cuts are going to be on Illinois, but yeah.
And we should say with the Medicaid cuts in particular, we're talking on Thursday. The deadline to pass a funding plan is Friday. There's this idea of the continuing resolution. The Medicaid cuts aren't coming for sure. It would be, but the way that Republicans want to lay out their cuts, Medicaid would have to be cut in order to reach their high number, their lofty goals that they would have. So that's where that conversation gets into, and that again just gets into the argument from Republicans in this sense is that a lot of this is theoretical, I guess, in this stage. Jeremy?
Well, I was going to add one more thing to that is like it's theoretical, but also on the other side of the coin for Democrats, I think to what Brenden was talking about. It's repetitious, and the hearings might appear to be repetitious in that you saw Governor Pritzker about 2 weeks ago hold a big press conference in Chicago with pretty much with a number of Illinois Democratic congressmen, and both and one or both U.S. senators, basically kind of talking about the threats that Medicaid cuts could have, and really looking at it big picture, it really goes to show you that how far the Democratic Party has fallen in that they don't control Congress. All they have is a megaphone, and in that case, they're pleading to the public, their constituents, to raise to raise alarm bells about this problem. And it's like, you're the elected leaders, why can't you do that? And it's like, because they're essentially powerless. So Democrats are doing the only thing that they know how to do, and that's raise these kinds of alarm bells, like Brenden was saying. And in like one case, with Medicaid, what we've seen, they've tried to do it in a way where, hey, this is how this could affect Republican districts too. But again, so far Republicans have kind of undermined, that messaging.
And to go off of that, in the Medicaid hearing a couple of weeks ago, Rep. Bill Howder, who is from Central Illinois, he's a doctor, Republican, said, well, this is performative. These hearings are performative.
Exactly.
And State Rep. Lindsay LaPointe, a liberal Democrat from Chicago, said, well, this is not, or well, maybe it is, but we're performing for Illinois' 3 Republican congressional members who might have some influence. If the 3 of them voted against the plan, then you could take it because the House is so close between Republicans and Democrats. So they're kind of using this as, you are the Republican elected officials in the State House and the Senate. You have relationships with these people. You talk to them and let them know, how this is going to impact your constituents. But at the same time, I think it does kind of fall on deaf ears a little bit because, as we've talked about ad nauseum on this show, the map is gerrymandered so egregiously in that, the Democrats to stretch out as many districts for themselves have kind of packed in these Republicans in these very, very ruby red Republican districts. So the only way Mary Miller, Darren LaHood, or Mike Boss lose is in a Republican primary. they're not going to go against President Trump. And if President Trump is for this plan, they're going to be for this plan. Yeah,
and it'll be interesting to see how that does shift when real impacts start to hit, though, in these areas. I mean, you've seen congressional Republicans advise their members not to hold town halls at this point because some of these are getting so aggressive. I don't know if either of you have seen it, but there's been rumblings on social media to try to hold a town hall without Mary Miller in her district because people are like, why aren't we hearing from her in some of these areas? Now, that might not be the most hardcore Republicans in her district holding that kind of effort, but there is that conversation brewing when we're starting to see real impacts to real people on the ground. That'll be in, again, I think there's the cynical outlook on some of these hearings. There's the political theater aspect of it. There's also the aspect of just getting experts in the room. I think that has been something that has been successful about these hearings is that you're not just hearing your Democratic lawmaker complain about some of these things. You're hearing the Illinois Hospital Association come up and say, there are going to be safety net hospitals that would need to close if major Medicaid cuts happen. Or you're having farmers, the University of Illinois, come up in the USDA hearing and talking about the clear impacts that is having. Though that is one of the advantages of having these big hearings is you're getting a lot of these impacted people from different sectors in the same room to have these conversations about it.
Yeah, and to add to that, I mean, as Jeremy said, I mean, a lot of Republicans are taking a wait and see approach that, you know, even with the funding freeze from a few weeks ago, they said, well, that's just temporary. They're just looking at, you know, ways to be more efficient, and we got to wait and see. And I think there may be an effort to maybe kind of play the inside game of, you know, Republicans are never going to go out and say, you know, President Trump, this is a bad plan, but maybe back channel behind the scenes of, hey, this affects a lot of my constituents. We can't make cuts to USDA because that affects my farmers.
As soon as one of those hits lands, though, every one of these hearings is going to turn into election commercial fodder in 2 years. And we know what happened the last time around in a Trump midterm election to Republicans in this state. So that's going to be something to watch too. That's definitely an aspect of these committees as well, trying to put Republicans on the spot to defend the actions of what's happening right now in D.C. Brenden, Jeremy, I don't want to let you go yet. We're going to come back with more of our roundtable. I want to talk about some great reporting that you guys have done on a particular budget item for Pritzker this year. So we're going to be right back with more of our Reporters Roundtable.